The hospital room in Johannesburg felt too quiet. The pale ceiling lights hummed softly above Zola Ndlovu as she lay weak in the bed, her body still heavy from surgery. Just a few hours earlier, the 29-year-old had made the biggest sacrifice of her life. She had donated one of her kidneys to save her mother-in-law, Mama Thandai Dlamini. Doctors had said the transplant was the only way to keep Thandai alive. Without it, she might not survive the year. When Zola discovered she was the only match in the family, she didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. In her heart, she believed this was her chance to finally prove she truly belonged in the Dlamini family. For 5 long years, Zola had tried to earn their acceptance. She had smiled through awkward family dinners, ignored cold comments about her background in Soweto, and stayed silent when relatives hinted she wasn't good enough for their wealthy household. Through all of it, she told herself one thing: one day they would see her heart. And now she had given them something no one else could give: her kidney, her health, a piece of her life. As Zola rested in the hospital bed, still feeling the dull pain in her side, she imagined how things might change. Maybe Mama Thandai would finally look at her with pride. Maybe the family would thank her. Maybe her husband, Sibusiso, would hold her hand and tell her how much she meant to him. The door slowly opened. Sibusiso stepped inside. But something felt wrong immediately. His face was cold. No smile. No relief. No emotion. He didn't rush to her side or ask how she was feeling. Instead, he walked quietly to the small table beside her bed and placed a stack of papers there. "Sign these when you're ready," he said flatly. Confused and weak, Zola slowly reached for the papers. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the first page. Then her heart stopped. They were divorce papers. The man she had just sacrificed her body for had come to the hospital not to thank her, but to end their marriage. 5 years earlier, Zola Ndlovu believed she had found the love of her life. She met Sibusiso Dlamini in Durban when she was just 24, working hard and dreaming about building a better future. At the beginning, everything felt perfect. Sibusiso was charming, confident, and came from a successful family. When he asked her to marry him, Zola felt like all her prayers had been answered. Their wedding was beautiful, filled with music, laughter, and bright smiles. Zola truly believed she was stepping into a new chapter of happiness. She imagined a life where she and Sibusiso would support each other, grow together, and build a warm family. But after the wedding, things slowly began to change. The first signs were small. Little comments that sounded harmless at first. During family dinners, Sibusiso's relatives would sometimes ask questions that made Zola uncomfortable. "So Zola," one aunt once said with a polite smile, "your parents still live in Soweto, right?" Zola nodded. "Yes, they do." The woman raised her eyebrows slightly. It must have been very different growing up there. The room became quiet, and Zola felt the hidden meaning behind those words. She forced a smile and tried to ignore it. But the comments didn't stop. Sibusiso's mother, Mama Thandai Dlamini, was the one who made Zola feel the most unwelcome. Thandai was known as a powerful woman in the family, someone whose opinion everyone respected. From the beginning, she made it clear that she believed her son could have married someone better. Sometimes she didn't even hide it. During one dinner, she calmly said, "In families like ours, marriage is not only about love, it's also about reputation." The message was clear. Zola understood exactly what she meant. In Thandai's eyes, Zola was just a girl from a modest background. Her parents were hardworking but not wealthy. Her job was respectable, but not impressive enough for a family that owned businesses and expensive properties. And slowly, those quiet insults became a normal part of Zola's life. What hurt even more was Sibusiso's silence. Whenever his family made those comments, he rarely defended her. Sometimes he would simply change the subject. Other times he would pretend not to notice. Each time it happened, Zola felt a small piece of her heart break. Still, she kept telling herself that things would get better. She loved her husband deeply, and she believed that marriage required patience and sacrifice. She worked hard to be the perfect wife. She helped organize family gatherings, supported Sibusiso's career, and always treated his relatives with respect, even when they didn't show the same kindness to her. There were nights when she cried quietly after everyone had gone to sleep. Nights when she wondered if she would ever truly belong in the Dlamini family. But every morning she woke up with the same hope. One day they would see her efforts. One day they would accept her. And one day she believed Sibusiso would finally stand beside her and prove that she was not just his wife, but a valued member of his family. Zola had no idea that the pain she had quietly endured for 5 years was only the beginning of something much worse. Life in the Dlamini family continued with the same quiet tension for years, until one morning everything suddenly changed. It started with a phone call. Zola still remembered the day clearly. She was at home when Sibusiso called her from the hospital. His voice sounded different, shaky and rushed. "Mom collapsed this morning," he said. "The doctors are running tests." Within an hour, Zola was already on her way to the hospital. When she arrived, the whole family was gathered in the waiting area. No one was talking much. The atmosphere felt heavy, like everyone was afraid to hear the truth. After what felt like forever, a doctor finally came out to speak with them. He explained that Mama Thandai's kidneys were failing rapidly. Her condition was serious. Without treatment, her body would slowly begin to shut down. The only real solution was a kidney transplant. The news shocked everyone. Thandai had always seemed strong and powerful, the kind of woman who controlled every situation. Seeing her weak in a hospital bed felt unreal. The doctor then explained the next step. A transplant could save her life, but first they had to find a compatible donor. Naturally, the family assumed one of her children would be the match. Sibusiso and his siblings quickly agreed to get tested. Over the next few days, everyone waited anxiously for the results. But when the doctors finally returned with the news, the room fell silent. None of them were compatible. Not Sibusiso. Not his brother. Not his sister. No one. The disappointment on their faces was impossible to hide. Without a donor, Thandai would have to wait on the national transplant list. That process could take years, time she probably didn't have. Zola sat quietly during the conversation, listening carefully. Then one of the doctors looked at her. "There is one more person we can test," he said gently. "Sometimes in-laws can also be compatible." Everyone turned to look at her. For a moment Zola felt nervous. She had never expected to be part of this situation. But she nodded anyway. "Of course," she said softly. "Test me." The blood tests were done later that day. Zola tried not to think about it too much. She told herself the chances were small. But 2 days later, the doctor asked her to come back to the hospital. When she sat down in his office, he smiled slightly. "You're a match," he said. Zola stared at him in disbelief. She was the only compatible donor. Out of the entire family, the one person they had always treated like an outsider was the one who could save Thandai's life. The doctor carefully explained the risks of the surgery. Donating a kidney was serious. It meant a painful operation and a long recovery. Even though people could live normal lives with one kidney, it was still a big decision. Zola listened quietly. In her mind, she already knew the answer. This was her chance. For years she had tried to prove that she truly cared about this family. Maybe this was the moment that would finally change everything. Maybe Mama Thandai would finally see her differently. Maybe Sibusiso would be proud of her. Maybe the family would finally accept her as one of their own. So without hesitation, Zola looked at the doctor and said the words that would change her life forever. "I'll do it." Zola's hands were still shaking as she held the divorce papers in the quiet hospital room. Her body felt weak from the surgery and the pain in her side was still fresh. Just hours earlier, doctors had removed one of her kidneys to save her mother-in-law's life. She had expected many things after such a sacrifice. Maybe a thank you, maybe tears, maybe even a moment of appreciation. But she never expected this. Across the room, Sibusiso stood with his arms folded, his face calm and distant, as if nothing important had just happened. Zola slowly looked up at him, confusion and pain filling her eyes. "Sibusiso, what is this?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "They're divorce papers," he replied without emotion. For a moment, Zola thought she had misunderstood him. Her mind struggled to process his words. "Divorce," she whispered. "But I just had surgery. I just saved your mother's life." Sibusiso sighed as if this conversation was simply an inconvenience. "I know," he said. "And I appreciate what you did for her." His words sounded empty. Zola stared at him in disbelief. "Then why are you doing this now?" For a few seconds he remained silent. Then he finally spoke, his tone cold and direct. "Because this was already planned," he said. The words felt like a knife cutting through her chest. "What do you mean?" Zola asked. Sibusiso looked away for a moment before answering. "My family has never believed this marriage was right," he admitted. "They've been pushing me to end it for a long time." Zola's heart pounded loudly in her ears. "So, you're divorcing me because of them?" she asked. "It's not just them," he said calmly. "They think I should marry someone more suitable." The word suitable echoed painfully in Zola's mind. For years she had heard those same quiet judgments from his family. But hearing her own husband say it out loud felt far worse. What does that even mean? She asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Sibusiso shrugged slightly. Someone from the same social circle. Someone whose family matches ours. Someone who understands our lifestyle. Every word felt heavier than the last. Zola's voice cracked as she spoke again. And you decided this before the surgery? Yes, he answered simply. She stared at him, completely stunned. You knew you were going to divorce me, she said slowly, and you still let me donate my kidney to your mother? Sibusiso didn't look guilty. He didn't look ashamed. The transplant was necessary, he said coldly. My mother needed it. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the air had been sucked out of it. Zola felt a wave of betrayal rush through her body. I thought, maybe after this, your family would finally accept me, she said quietly. Sibusiso shook his head. That was never going to happen, he replied. Tears slowly rolled down Zola's cheeks as the painful truth settled in. For 5 years she had fought to be part of this family. She had ignored insults, swallowed her pride, and sacrificed everything for her marriage. And in the end, even giving away a piece of her own body wasn't enough. To Sibusiso and his family she had never been a wife. She had only been useful. The days after the surgery felt slow and heavy for Zola. Her body was still recovering, and every small movement reminded her of the painful operation she had just gone through. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the storm of emotions in her heart. The divorce papers still sat on the small table beside her hospital bed. Sometimes she would look at them and wonder if the whole thing was a nightmare. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. Sibusiso walking into the room, placing the papers down like it was nothing, and calmly telling her their marriage was over. It didn't make sense. Zola knew his family never fully accepted her, but something about the situation felt wrong. The timing was too strange. Why would he wait until after the transplant to end the marriage? If he had already planned to divorce her, why allow her to go through such a dangerous surgery first? The question kept circling in her mind. Late one evening, as the hospital corridor grew quiet, a nurse entered Zola's room to check her medication. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who had been caring for Zola since the surgery. You're healing well, the nurse said gently while adjusting the foreline. But you need to rest more. Zola forced a small smile. I'm trying. The nurse hesitated for a moment as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure if she should. Zola noticed the hesitation. Is something wrong? She asked. The nurse glanced toward the door to make sure no one was nearby. Then she stepped a little closer to the bed and lowered her voice. I'm not sure if I should mention this, she said quietly, but I thought you should know. Zola's heart started beating faster. What is it? She asked. The nurse spoke carefully. Earlier today I passed by the private waiting room down the hall, she explained. Your husband and another woman were inside. I believe she said her name was Nomvula. Zola immediately recognized the name. Nomvula was Sibusiso's older sister. They didn't see me, the nurse continued, but I overheard part of their conversation. Zola slowly pushed herself up on the bed, ignoring the pain in her side. What were they talking about? She asked. The nurse looked uncomfortable. They were arguing about money, she said quietly. Something about their mother's condition, and the family business. Zola frowned, confused. The business, she repeated. The nurse nodded. I heard your husband say something like, now that the transplant is done, everything will stay in the family. And his sister replied, good. If Mom had died, the inheritance would have become complicated. Zola felt a chill run through her body. Inheritance, family business. The nurse continued, her voice even softer now. They sounded relieved that the surgery worked, she said. But not in the way you would expect. It felt more like they were worried about financial things. The room suddenly felt colder. Zola's mind began racing. For the first time, a disturbing thought entered her mind. What if this wasn't just about family pressure or social status? What if there was another reason Sibusiso allowed the surgery to happen? What if saving his mother's life wasn't only about love, but about money? As the nurse quietly left the room, Zola lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling again. But this time she wasn't thinking about the divorce anymore. She was beginning to realize that the betrayal might be much deeper than she ever imagined. After the nurse left that night, Zola could not stop thinking about what she had heard. Her mind kept repeating the same words. Inheritance, family business, everything will stay in the family. Something about it didn't feel right. For the first time, Zola started looking at the situation from a different angle. Maybe the divorce wasn't just about his family thinking she wasn't suitable. Maybe there was something much bigger happening behind the scenes. The next morning, Zola quietly began asking questions. While she was still recovering in the hospital, she had a lot of time to think. She started searching online using her phone, looking up information about the Dlamini family businesses. She already knew that Sibusiso's family was wealthy, but she had never paid attention to the details before. His family rarely talked openly about their finances around her. But what she discovered surprised her. The Dlamini family owned a large business empire based in Cape Town. Over the years, Mama Thandai had built several successful companies. Real estate developments, logistics companies, and even shares in international trading businesses. The more Zola read, the more she realized just how powerful Thandai really was. Articles described her as a strong and respected business leader. Many people believed that she was the true head of the entire family empire. But one detail caught Zola's attention immediately. According to several business reports, Thandai still personally controlled the majority of the company shares. That meant she was the one who decided who would lead the businesses in the future. Zola kept reading carefully. Then she found something even more shocking. If Thandai passed away without officially transferring leadership, the companies would not automatically go to her children. Instead, control would temporarily move to a board of trustees that included distant relatives and outside investors until a new leader was legally appointed. That process could take years. During that time, the Dlamini children, including Sibusiso, would lose direct control of the business. Zola slowly lowered her phone, her heart pounding. Suddenly everything started making sense. If Thandai had died from kidney failure, the family could have lost control of the empire she built. Their wealth, power, and influence might have shifted to other relatives or business partners. But because of the transplant, Thandai survived, and Zola was the one who made that possible. She had unknowingly protected the entire future of the Dlamini family fortune. A painful realization hit her. Sibusiso knew exactly how important the transplant was. He knew his mother needed to survive in order for the family to keep control of their businesses. And somehow, he had allowed Zola to go through with the surgery while already planning to divorce her. The truth made her stomach twist. She had believed she was saving a life out of love and family loyalty. But now it felt like something much darker. It felt like she had been used. Used to secure their financial future. Used to protect their wealth. And once her sacrifice was no longer needed, they had simply decided to throw her away. Zola stared out the hospital window, the city lights glowing in the distance. For years she had tried to prove she belonged in the Dlamini family. But now she finally understood something painful. To them she had never been family. She had only been part of a plan. The days passed slowly in the hospital. Zola spent most of her time alone, trying to recover both physically and emotionally. The pain from the surgery was still there, but the pain in her heart felt even heavier. She kept thinking about everything that had happened. Her sacrifice, the divorce papers, and the possibility that she had been used to protect the Dlamini family's fortune. Sibusiso had not visited her again since the day he dropped off the divorce papers. That silence said more than any words could. Zola tried to stay strong, but sometimes the loneliness felt overwhelming. The family she had tried so hard to please for 5 years was nowhere around her now. One quiet afternoon, as sunlight softly filled the hospital room, Zola heard a gentle knock on the door. She expected it to be a nurse. But when the door slowly opened, she froze in surprise. Standing in the doorway was Mama Thandai Dlamini. She looked weaker than usual, still recovering from her own surgery, but she stood tall as always. 2 hospital staff members helped her walk slowly into the room before quietly leaving them alone. For a moment, neither woman spoke. This was the same woman who had spent years criticizing Zola, making small comments about her background and reminding everyone that she came from a modest family in Soweto. Zola didn't know what to expect now. Finally, Thandai spoke. Her voice was softer than Zola had ever heard before. "I heard what my son did," she said. Zola looked down at the blanket covering her legs. The humiliation still felt fresh. "Yes," she replied quietly. "He brought the divorce papers." Thandai's face tightened with anger. "I didn't know," she said firmly. "If I had known he planned something like that, I would have stopped it immediately." Zola wasn't sure how to respond. For years she had wanted to hear kindness from this woman, but now that it was happening, it almost felt unreal. Thandai slowly sat down in the chair beside the bed. For a moment she simply looked at Zola, studying her carefully as if seeing her for the first time. "You gave me your kidney," she said after a long silence. Zola nodded slightly. "You could have said no," Thandai continued. "After the way this family treated you, many people would have walked away." Zola swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for approval," she said quietly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Thandai's eyes softened. For years she had believed Zola was too simple, too ordinary for her powerful family. But now she was starting to see something she had completely missed before. "Strength. Real strength. You saved my life," Thandai said slowly. Zola didn't reply. Then Thandai leaned forward slightly and lowered her voice. "There are things happening in this family that you don't know about," she said. Zola looked up at her. "What do you mean?" she asked. Thandai sighed deeply. "I recently learned about the conversation between Sibusiso and Nomvula," she said. "About the business and the inheritance." Zola's heart skipped. "So it's true?" she asked. Thandai nodded slowly. "Yes," she admitted. "And what my son did to you is something I will not ignore." For the first time since the betrayal began, Zola felt something unexpected. She was no longer completely alone. The most powerful woman in the Dlamini family, the same woman who once doubted her, was finally starting to see the truth. A few weeks after the surgery, once both she and Zola were strong enough to leave the hospital, Mama Thandai made a decision that shocked everyone in the Dlamini family. She called for a full family meeting at her large home in Cape Town. Whenever Thandai requested a meeting like that, everyone knew it was serious. Relatives began arriving one by one. Sibusiso was there along with his sister Nomvula, his brother Themba, and several other close family members who were connected to the family businesses. The atmosphere in the living room felt tense even before the meeting started. No one knew exactly why Thandai had called them together so suddenly. When Thandai finally walked into the room, everyone immediately went quiet. Even though she was still recovering from the transplant, she carried herself with the same strong presence that had built her business empire over the years. She slowly took a seat at the head of the long table and looked around the room. Then something happened that surprised everyone even more. Zola walked in behind her. Several relatives exchanged confused glances. Some of them knew about the divorce situation, but no one expected Zola to be there. Sibusiso's face tightened when he saw her. "What is she doing here?" he asked quietly. Thandai turned her eyes toward him immediately. "She's here because this situation concerns her more than anyone," she replied firmly. The room became silent again. Thandai folded her hands on the table and spoke calmly, but there was clear anger in her voice. "I have recently learned something disturbing about my own family," she said. No one spoke. She looked directly at Sibusiso. "My son," she continued slowly, "allowed his wife to go through a life-threatening surgery to save my life, while secretly planning to divorce her immediately afterward." A wave of shock moved through the room. Several relatives turned to look at Sibusiso, waiting for him to deny it. But he stayed silent. Thandai continued speaking. "Zola gave me one of her kidneys," she said. "She risked her health to save me. And instead of gratitude, my own son handed her divorce papers while she was still lying in a hospital bed." People began whispering quietly among themselves. Nomvula shifted uncomfortably in her chair. But Thandai was not finished. "I also learned something else," she said, her voice becoming sharper. "A conversation between Sibusiso and Nomvula about why my survival was so important to them." The room suddenly became very still. Nomvula looked down at the table. Thandai's eyes moved between both of her children. "You weren't worried about losing your mother," she said firmly. "You were worried about losing control of the company." A few relatives gasped softly. Sibusiso finally spoke, his voice defensive. "Mom, that's not fair. We were thinking about the future of the family." "The future of the family?" Thandai repeated coldly. "You mean the future of your bank accounts?" The words hit the room like a thunderclap. No one dared to interrupt her now. "You allowed this woman to sacrifice part of her body for this family," Thandai continued, gesturing toward Zola. "And the moment she was no longer useful to you, you tried to throw her away." Sibusiso looked frustrated. "This is between me and my wife," he said. "No," Thandai replied sharply. "It became a family matter the moment you used this family's name and power to treat someone so cruelly." All eyes slowly turned toward Zola. For the first time since the betrayal began, the truth was no longer hidden. The entire family now knew exactly what Sibusiso had done. And the silence in the room made it clear that nothing in the Dlamini family would ever be the same again. The room was still tense from the family confrontation. Relatives sat quietly, exchanging nervous glances. Sibusiso's face was red with frustration, and Nomvula looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. No one had expected Thandai to react so strongly. And yet, everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. Thandai stood slowly from her chair, her presence commanding attention. She didn't raise her voice, but there was no mistaking the authority in her tone. "Enough," she said firmly, and the room fell completely silent. She looked at Sibusiso directly. "Your actions have consequences," she said. "You used Zola's love and loyalty to protect your own interests. That is not how this family operates." Sibusiso tried to speak, but Thandai held up her hand, stopping him. "No excuses," she said. "You will no longer have any authority over the family business." Gasps rippled through the room. Some relatives looked shocked, others whispered to each other in disbelief. Sibusiso's face turned pale. "Mom, you can't," he began, but she cut him off sharply. "I can," she said calmly. "And I will." Thandai turned to Zola, who was still sitting quietly, stunned by the intensity of the moment. "Zola," she said softly, "you have shown courage, selflessness and loyalty that none of my children have matched. You risked your own life to save mine without asking for anything in return. That kind of heart should be honored." Zola blinked back tears. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Thandai continued, "Therefore I am establishing a charitable foundation in your honor. It will support families and patients who need organ transplants but cannot afford them. And control of the company, major authority, will be transferred to this foundation, ensuring that the company's work will continue to help people, not just enrich the greedy or careless." The room was silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of shock, awe and disbelief. Sibusiso's jaw dropped. He couldn't move. Nomvula's face was pale and even the other relatives looked stunned. Zola's heart pounded. For years she had been treated like she didn't belong. For years she had endured insults, humiliation and betrayal. And now, all at once, the balance of power had shifted. Thandai's voice softened and she looked directly at Sibusiso one last time. "Let this be a lesson," she said. "Respect, loyalty and sacrifice are worth more than wealth, privilege or family connections. And those who fail to understand that, will no longer hold power over those who do." With that, the meeting ended. The family members slowly filed out, whispering to each other. Zola felt a strange mix of relief, disbelief and triumph. She had not only survived the betrayal, but she had also been honored in a way she never expected. For the first time in her life, Zola felt true justice, not through anger or revenge but through recognition of her heart, her courage and the power of her selfless sacrifice. Months had passed since the shocking family meeting, and life for Zola had begun to feel different, lighter in a way she hadn't thought possible. The divorce was finalized, Sibusiso was out of her life, and the Dlamini family's business empire was now being used for something far greater than greed. Zola stood outside a sleek, modern medical center in Pretoria, the early morning sun reflecting off the glass walls. She felt a mixture of nerves and excitement as she watched patients, doctors and volunteers move about. This was the place where her life's new purpose had taken shape. Through the charitable foundation established in her honor, she had helped create a program dedicated to supporting patients who needed organ transplants but didn't have the financial means to get them. Every time she walked through these halls, she remembered the moment that had brought her here. The betrayal, the divorce papers, the coldness of the man she once loved. But instead of letting that pain define her, she had chosen to transform it into something powerful. She had turned heartbreak into hope, selfishness into generosity and cruelty into compassion. Zola smiled as a nurse approached her with a young boy, holding the hand of his anxious mother. The boy had just received news that he was eligible for a kidney transplant, something that would not have been possible without the foundation. The mother's gratitude and the boy's shy smile filled Zola with a warmth she had never felt before. For years she had felt like an outsider, overlooked and undervalued. But now she realized that her true worth wasn't determined by anyone else's acceptance. Her courage, her heart and her willingness to sacrifice had created something far bigger than herself. As Zola looked at the center buzzing with life, she whispered softly to herself, "This is what it's all for." The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. What had once felt like the deepest hurt had become a legacy of strength, hope and compassion. A life she could be proud of.